So yeah, the conversation in the chat that sticks out. One does involve Brian Hartline, but I want to get to so Willie had made a comment about Ohio State more than recruiting. It's about, of course, a great job developing players, and then row the boat saying, who's been developed at Ohio State? And that's a tricky question because, of course, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, could they just have stepped on anywhere? No development. They're going to be first round picks in the NFL draft. Versus, okay, can we point to a lot of mid 3-stars that were developed at Ohio State and became impact players, NFL players?
Yeah, well, I think it's a mix.
Well, just to and this will go back a little bit, but I'll bring it back more present day-ish. But Brian Hartline's class in 2005, a couple of other 3-stars, he was a 3-star, a couple of other 3-stars in that class, James Laurinaitis and Malcolm Jenkins. But in terms of development, here's something that Ohio State's 2015 defensive backs. These are just 8 of those guys in that secondary that year. Eli Apple, Damon Arnett, both first-rounders, Garyon Conley, first-rounder, Marshawn Lattimore, first-rounder, Denzel Ward, first-rounder, Von Bell, All-American, second-rounder, Malik Hooker, All-American, first-rounder, Tyvis Powell, 3-year starter, national champion. I think Eli Apple was a 5-star on ESPN. Everybody else, Von Bell was a 5-star. Everybody else, 3 and 4 stars. So, that's one example. And I see some other talks in here about, C.J. Stroud not being developed, or, Chris Olave, obviously another one. But there's plenty of development going on. I'm not going to name all the names because we could go around each of us and name 10 or 5.
Well, I just jumped in and looked at the 2015 Ohio State recruiting class, and I scrolled down, and lo and behold, at one of the commitments was a guy named Denzel Ward from Macedonia, Nordonia. He was the number 270 player in the country. Then the guy right below him was a quarterback from the Plains, Ohio, Athens High School, Joe Burrow, 280th in the country. Those 2 guys, I would say somebody developed them. I know Burrow wasn't completely developed at Ohio State and didn't finish at Ohio State, but I would say, and they were 4-star guys, I could think anybody inside the top, looks like top 350 was a 4-star, but that seems kind of a loose definition of a 4-star to me. But at any rate, that'll give you an idea. Then as you scroll on down, Robert Landers was a guy who played a lot of football at Ohio State. He was 481. Damon Arnett was clear down at 653. So until he was having problems, obviously, off the field, he was an NFL player. So
Davon Hamilton in that class.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's a mix. I think obviously the top, in a given year, they're going to sign 20 to 25 guys. And let's just say 4 of the top 6 or 7 in each class are going to contend for All-American and NFL. I mean, you can pretty much figure that 4 of the top, read the top 7 names and figure out that 3 or 4 of those guys are going to pan out and be best in the Big Ten at their position, possible first 3-round pick of the NFL draft. I mean, they're going to pan out. That's just the history of this whole recruiting phenomenon, is that blue stars or blue chips generally, are going to pan out probably about 60% of the time, roughly 50 to 60% of the time. Where you win championships, to me, is when you have those other guys who fill in around the edges and around the cracks, and like Denzel Ward, play like blue chip guys, outplay their ranking. That's when you have a chance to have a special team, because, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, they're all going to have in their starting lineup 8 or 10 blue chip guys out of the 22 who made it, but the other 10 or 11 are program guys. And I think that there's a lot of a credit that goes to the coaches for that.
Yeah, just to kind of say the same things a different way. When you're Ohio State and you recruit a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys, therefore those guys can't. I mean, are they developed or whatever? Well, they were 4- and 5 stars, so I mean, we unfairly judge them differently. So when you sit there and you have, you bring in some 3s. I mean, sometimes you're rolling the dice on some of these guys, and they've been able to develop some of them. They've not been able to develop some of them. I'm sitting here kind of looking through. I'm working on a project as well for a feature that I'll be running to cover me while I'm on vacation here in a few weeks. And guys like, Blue Smith didn't work out. He had 2 receptions for 19 yards. He's a 4-star. People are going to focus on that, but not look at Chris Olave in the class, who had 175 receptions, 2,700 yards, and 35 touchdowns. You go, and it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Guys do get developed, but when you already come in as a top 100 kid, a top 247 kid, or whatever, and you perform as expected, well, that's not development. That's just living up to your billing. So you can become a victim of your own success.
Well, and that's exactly
taking a swipe at CJ is a little bit disingenuous, because they didn't lose the Oregon game or the Michigan game because of anything CJ Stroud did or didn't do. So I don't get where attacking him and whatever. I mean, he is what he is. His number and his impact kind of speaks for itself.
Well, and anytime you're trying to apparently use the Rose Bowl performance as proof that he wasn't developed or didn't play well is kind of baffling to me. And even the first start against Minnesota, he threw for 294 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. And then against Oregon, it was 484 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Michigan, 394 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception. Utah, 573 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. These are examples of 4 bad games where he threw 15 touchdowns and 3 interceptions and went for about 1,500 yards. There's a segment of Buckeye fans who I apparently only think quarterback play started at Ohio State from 2018. And they only measure guys by the very best that Dwayne Haskins ever was and the very best that Justin Fields ever was. And if you're short of that, you suck. And to say CJ looked bad his first 2 games is ridiculous. And to say CJ Stroud didn't look as good as Dwayne Haskins at his best or Justin Fields at his best would be accurate. But then it was also better than any other quarterbacks outside of those 2. And when you are better, and he ended up having a season that was arguably the best in Ohio State football history for what he did in 12 games, throwing for over 4,400 yards. And the desire to latch on to some of these flaws that people believe CJ Stroud has, there are so many other issues to, if you want to complain about something with Ohio State, there are much more real issues than the guy who has not been flawless, but as close to flawless as you can get as a quarterback in the game. And I get annoyed when I see it wherever, and I see it on Twitter, I see it on our message board, see it here now. It's ridiculous to me.
If Ohio State would have been able to run the ball with any success against Michigan to change things up, that would have loosened a couple things up. I can certainly go back to a couple of throws that either CJ was a little bit off on or didn't make. There were a couple throws that it's like, I wish he would have, been able to do that. We might have been talking about a little bit of a different setup at that point. I would have been able to get a steak in Indianapolis. But, what happened. But, yeah, there's nobody hates the Buckeyes like Buckeyes fans. And I'm not saying everybody in general, but there certainly are some people out there that just are very critical and look at them through an eye of where they're robots and video game characters that should be able to to perform at 110% capacity at any given moment, at any point. I mean, you can't get up for every game, and and I'm not using that as an example for Michigan or for Oregon even. I mean, those are big games, you got to get up for them, but you run into times where you're just not as sharp. But CJ Stroud's unsharpness is better than a lot of other people's sharpness. And to get back to something else that Row the Boat had to say as well, no, it's not about yardage and some of these others. It's about points that get put up. But there's a lot of things that go into there. If you're going to oversimplify the argument, I'm going to oversimplify the argument too and say that it doesn't rest all on CJ Stroud at that point. And truthfully, if the defense would have been 20% better, not as much of it would have been on CJ Stroud's shoulders. So it's a disingenuous argument.
Absolutely. It's a team game, and the quarterback gets too much credit, gets too much blame. And also, to be cliched again, as somebody famously once said, the other guys on the other side are on scholarship as well. So you're not throwing against air. It's difficult to stand in that pocket with all sorts of chaos going on around you. And I've said this before, and I don't know if this is true, but it just seems to be, with all the interaction I have with fans and their expectations, is I think there's just too much watching of Rodgers and Brady on Sundays and thinking that everybody should just automatically throw like that.
People need to go back and watch the Ohio State, the 2016, 2017 Ohio State, to see how difficult passing the ball can be and how much easier it is now for the Ohio State quarterbacks. And you will have a renewed appreciation for what you have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gone back and watched some old games. I think I talked about it on the show. Maybe it was this show last week that I was watching the 2010 Sugar Bowl, and that was a big passing output. And it looks nothing like what the offense looks like now. And you know what? We can sit there and we can talk about Nebraska, and we can talk about some other things there at this point. And I'm not going to get back into the history and be like who they had this week and who they didn't have that other week. And 21 wasn't as bad as 20 in terms of people disappearing from the lineup. But there's a lot of blame that can go around for less than perfect performances. And I'm not going to put the vast majority of that at the feet of CJ Stroud. I'm just not.
Cameron 2K says there's only 3 to 5 schools who would not want CJ Stroud. Are there 3 to 5 schools that would not want CJ Stroud?
I think maybe you put Alabama on that list because they just don't want the stress of trying to figure out what to do there.
Then I think that's the list.
And it's not because they wouldn't want them. It's because I don't want the headache. We're good with what we have.
Right. SC, Caleb Williams, and of course, Walter Camp, the preseason team there seeing fit to put, put the returning Heisman winner, Bryce Young, 1. I'm totally fine with that. And then put Bryce, put Caleb Williams, 2, a guy who's in a new system, bunch of new dudes around him, instead of the guy that finished 4th for the Heisman, left a closing argument by putting up 48 on Oregon or on Utah. And I understand that they had an offensive player playing defense, and there were some issues with all of that, but he was also doing it without Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson out there. But then again, that's just not good enough, and we should probably just fire up the should Kyle McCord start argument right about now.
It's crazy talk. That's for sure. That Walter Camp thing was just stunning to me. I mean, yeah, I hear all the buzz for the guy from USC, how great they're going to be when they go 8-4, 9-3, like they always do. So, heck if I know.
Now he's got that defense. They'll get that defense situated. They've got Alex Grinch there to lock everything down. They're going to be good.